At the high plateau of Bolivia lies one of the most puzzling megalithic structures on Earth, known as Puma Punku, Door of the Puma. These ruins stand as one of Earth's greatest mysteries. By the time it was discovered by the Incas, Puma Punku was already abandoned. There exists no record beyond that of who might have built it or when. It forms part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, standing over 3,800 meters above sea level, almost 13,000 feet. Scattered across the windswept plain are enormous stone blocks carved from red sandstone and andesite, some weighing more than 100 tons. Their precision and engineering defy the imagination of anyone familiar with what conventional tools of pre-Columbian South America could accomplish. The red sandstone blocks were quarried from sources about 10 kilometers away, but the harder andesite stones seem to have been brought from quarries nearly 90 kilometers distant. Moving blocks of such mass across rough terrain at that altitude would challenge even modern equipment. The builders arranged these megaliths into perfectly aligned terraces, platforms, and interlocking shapes that show a level of geometric understanding far beyond expectation. Each surface appears to have been cut with accuracy measurable in millimeters, the planes meeting at immaculate right angles. Many blocks feature internal grooves, drilled holes, and sharp edges that look almost machined. Some stones are joined by precisely carved channels that once held bronze clamps shaped like an eye. These clamps, composed of a copper arsenic nickel alloy, were poured into the recesses to hold the blocks together, an engineering technique not typically seen in pre-Columbian masonry. But here's the problem with that. When you consider the altitude, 13,000 feet above sea level, oxygen levels are low, and generating the kind of sustained, intense heat required to melt and cast bronze becomes nearly impossible with primitive means. A simple campfire or even a basic forge could never reach the temperatures needed to work with such metal. Even more intriguing is that these distinctive key-shaped cuts and metal clamps are not unique to Bolivia. Identical features have been found at other advanced megalithic sites all across the globe, sites which were likely built by a long-lost civilization. Another fitting technique used for the iconic H-shaped blocks is the dovetail fitting. The inner groove between the two vertical posts of the H is not cut at a standard right angle. It forms a distinct dovetail shape, wider at the base and narrower at the top. This design is not accidental. It mirrors a technique still used in advanced woodworking and stone construction today to tightly lock two separate pieces together without the need for mortar or binding material. In modern engineering, a dovetail joint prevents lateral movement, creating a self-locking connection once the corresponding male counterpart is inserted. Each dovetail was crafted with such consistency that it appears to be part of a modular system, as if the builders intended the stones to interlock with a mechanical accuracy. Yet, despite the perfection of these cuts at Puma Punku, archaeologists have never found the matching male components that would have fit into them. This absence raises one of the site's most haunting questions. What exactly were these joints meant to hold? Another strange feature of Puma Punku lies not in its geometry, but in its invisible energy. Several researchers have noted that the andesite stones scattered across the site display unusual magnetic properties. When tested with compasses or magnetometers, the needle often drifts or spins erratically near certain blocks, suggesting that the stones themselves were somehow magnetized. What makes this peculiar is that the magnetism is not uniform. Some faces of the same stone attract while others repel, as if the builders intentionally polarized them. Andesite by nature contains small amounts of magnetic minerals such as magnetite and hematite, but in its natural form this would not create such sharply defined magnetic zones. For these stones to exhibit directional magnetism, their magnetic domains would have to be deliberately aligned, something that would require heat treatment or exposure to strong electromagnetic fields. This means that whoever shaped the blocks may have understood how to manipulate the stone at an atomic level. The tightness of the joints is astonishing, as even a razor blade cannot fit between many of them. Researchers have noted that the builders seem to have used a modular system of standardized stone forms. The repeating H-shaped blocks and interlocking designs imply that they were prefabricated to fit into a grand architectural plan. Such modularity suggests a form of mass production that would have required templates, measurement tools, and coordinated design principles. It is not merely artistry, but advanced geometric planning applied with consistency and purpose. We can see unfathomable anomalies uncharacteristic of the Tiwanaku civilization. This block, for example, has a perfect groove with identically spaced precision-cut 6mm holes drilled inside. And there are numerous other blocks with the same feature. Many believe this is clear evidence of the use of an advanced technology and possibly machine tools. In 2012, engineer Chris Dunn conducted an experiment to understand how the stones of Puma Punku might have been cut. He obtained a small fragment of andesite from one of the site's blocks and made 2 test cuts using modern equipment. One was done with a precision laser and the other with a diamond-bladed saw. The laser cut left distinct striations, fine, evenly spaced lines that differed from the original ancient surface, but the diamond saw produced a result strikingly similar to the smoothness of the Puma Punku stones. Dunn noted that, aside from thousands of years of erosion, the ancient cut could have been an almost perfect match to the modern diamond-sawn finish. Things got even stranger when, in 2009, ground-penetrating radar revealed massive chambers beneath Puma Punku. To this day, the site has not been deeply excavated, and the current excavation is only at the 2-foot-deep mark, and archaeologists have never gone deeper. The official narrative of Puma Punku's construction is that it was built around 536 AD by the Tiwanaku civilization, a pre-Incan culture that flourished near Lake Titicaca in the Bolivian highlands. According to this account, the Tiwanaku people, armed only with stone hammers, ropes, and primitive tools, managed to quarry, transport, and carve the enormous sandstone and andesite blocks that form the ruins. Yet when we look at the scale and logistics of what that would require, the story begins to collapse under its own weight. Some of the sandstone blocks at Puma Punku weigh between 130 and 180 tons each. These massive stones were quarried about 6 miles away, along a route that would have required crossing uneven terrain and at least one mountain range. Even more puzzling are the andesite blocks, smaller but intricately carved with millimeter precision. Geological analysis shows that these stones came from a quarry located on the slopes of a volcano more than 56 miles away. To reach Puma Punku from there, they would have had to be transported across the vast waters of Lake Titicaca, the largest lake in South America, and then hauled up nearly 13,000 feet to the plateau. The official explanation claims that these colossal blocks were dragged into place with ropes and wooden rollers, but Puma Punku sits well above the tree line, at an elevation where no trees grow naturally. There would have been no timber available to make such rollers or sledges. The idea that the builders somehow brought up vast quantities of wood from lower elevations for a project of this scale stretches plausibility to the breaking point. Even modern equipment would struggle to haul multi-ton blocks across such a landscape, much less primitive tools and ropes. In the 1960s, the Bolivian army attempted to recreate the process, using only ropes and manpower to lift a 2-ton stone, less than 2% the weight of some of the largest blocks at the site. After hours of effort, they barely managed to move it a few inches. If modern men equipped with nylon rope and proper footwear could not shift a 2-ton block, how did an ancient civilization transport and precisely position stones weighing nearly 100 times more? The mainstream explanation remains silent on this. Even if we assume, against all evidence, that they somehow managed to move these stones across mountains and lakes, another mystery remains: how they cut them. The red sandstone and andesite used at Puma Punku are both extremely hard materials. Andesite, a volcanic rock, ranks about 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, while copper, the hardest metal available to the Tiwanaku according to archaeologists, ranks only around 3. By basic principles of material science, a softer tool cannot cut or shape a harder material with precision. The idea that copper chisels and stone hammers could carve perfect right angles and mirror smooth surfaces in volcanic rock is simply not possible. If you understand hardness and tool interaction, this is not a matter of speculation. It is a physical law. You cannot carve dense andesite with tools softer than the rock itself any more than you could slice steel with a plastic knife. The only plausible ways to shape and polish stone of that hardness are through the use of harder materials, such as diamond or corundum, or with advanced cutting methods involving high heat, vibration, or abrasion beyond what any Bronze Age culture possessed. The Tiwanaku, as far as history tells us, had none of these. In fact, even the first Europeans who discovered Puma Punku believed it was built by an advanced lost civilization. The story really begins in South America in 1549, when a Spanish chronicler named Pedro Chiesa de Leon rode through the Bolivian highlands in search of the lost heart of the Inca Empire. Instead of finding the bustling capital he expected, he stumbled upon the windswept ruins of an ancient city that defied comprehension. He found massive stone statues, immense blocks scattered across the plain, and monumental doorways cut from single pieces of stone. What he saw made him doubt everything he thought he knew about the world's builders. In his journal, Pedro wrote, "In Tiwanaku stand stone statues so imposing that one wonders how the human hand could carry them to where they are today. Some of these stones are consumed and in ruins. Other stones form doorways, all made from a single block. We do not comprehend with which tools such work could have been achieved, and no one understands how these giant weights could have ever been moved." These words, recorded nearly 5 centuries ago, remain the first written account of Tiwanaku and its most mysterious sector, Puma Punku. Pedro was not a man easily impressed. He had seen the wonders of Cuzco and the royal cities of the Inca, yet nothing compared to what he found on that desolate plateau. When he asked the local Inca elders about who built these megalithic structures, their response was as cryptic as the stones themselves. He wrote, "I asked the natives whether these buildings had been erected during the age of the Incas. They laughed and answered that the buildings had been there for many years before the Incas began their rule. These structures, they assured me, had been built in a single night, constructed by beings whose origin they did not know." Those few lines changed everything. To Pedro, a man raised on Christian cosmology and European logic, the idea of unknown beings building such monuments in a single night was almost heretical. Yet the locals insisted that their ancestors had only inherited the ruins. They did not build them. While Puma Punku often steals the spotlight for its impossible architecture, Tiwanaku itself tells an even deeper story, one of cosmic alignment, lost knowledge, and a people whose mastery of the natural world remains unmatched. What remains today is only a fraction of what once stood, a monumental city built of perfectly fitted stones, pyramids, temples, and plazas aligned with celestial precision. The ruins whisper of a forgotten civilization that reached an extraordinary level of sophistication long before written history began. The site covers several square miles, encompassing massive stone structures that appear to have been carved and arranged according to astronomical cycles. Its foundation is cut into the bedrock, suggesting an understanding of geology and construction rarely seen in ancient cultures. The centerpiece of Tiwanaku is the Akapana Pyramid, a massive terraced mound once faced with finely cut stone blocks. It stands like a weathered mountain, rising in 7 distinct levels, each designed with symmetrical precision. Beyond the Akapana Pyramid lies the Kalasasaya Temple, a vast rectangular courtyard surrounded by towering stone pillars and walls. This structure was designed with celestial precision. Each monolith and gateway within Kalasasaya is aligned with astronomical events, the solstices, equinoxes, and possibly even lunar cycles. The temple appears to have functioned as a giant observatory, a place where the builders could track the movements of the sun and stars with astonishing accuracy. Inside Kalasasaya stands one of the most iconic artifacts in the Andes, the Gate of the Sun. Carved from a single block of andesite weighing over 10 tons, it remains one of the finest examples of pre-Columbian stonework. The gate features intricate relief carvings dominated by a central figure known as the sun god or Viracocha, surrounded by 30 smaller winged figures. Each of these attendants holds an object. Some appear to carry staffs, others animals or geometric symbols. The entire composition seems to encode astronomical or calendrical data, with patterns that may represent solar years, lunar cycles, or planetary movements. Some researchers have speculated that it was part of a greater system used to track time, perhaps serving as a stone calendar. Surrounding the temple complex are smaller courtyards and plazas filled with monolithic statues. The most famous of these is the Bennett monolith, also known as the Pachamama or Earth Mother statue. Standing over 20 feet tall and weighing an estimated 20 tons, this colossal figure is carved from a single stone and covered in complex iconography. Another haunting structure is the semi-subterranean temple, an open-air sunken court surrounded by walls into which 175 sculpted stone heads are embedded. Each face is unique, and strangely, the faces do not look like those of normal humans. Modern excavations have uncovered only a fraction of Tiwanaku's total area. Much of the city remains buried beneath layers of earth, possibly hidden under sediments from ancient floods. Satellite imagery has revealed traces of roads and canals extending far beyond the visible site, suggesting that Tiwanaku may once have been the heart of a vast urban and agricultural network that stretched across the high plains. Arthur Posnansky, an early 20th century explorer and researcher, dedicated much of his life to Tiwanaku and Puma Punku. He proposed that the complex was not built by the known Tiwanaku culture, but by a civilization that predated it by thousands of years. He spent over 50 years measuring, documenting, and analyzing every aspect of the ruins, eventually publishing his 4-volume masterpiece, Tiwanaku, The Cradle of American Man. In it, he presented a sweeping reinterpretation of Andean prehistory that directly challenged academic orthodoxy. Central to Posnansky's theory was the idea that Tiwanaku was not built around 500 AD as mainstream scholars maintain, but tens of thousands of years earlier during the final stages of the last ice age. He based this on the site's astronomical alignments. The Kalasasaya temple, he argued, was an ancient solar observatory. By studying the orientation of its walls and gateways relative to the sun's position at solstices and equinoxes, He claimed that Tiwanaku's builders had designed the structure to mark precise celestial events. But when Posnansky compared the temple's alignments to modern astronomical data, he discovered that they no longer matched the current solstitial positions. The angle of the sun's rising and setting had shifted. Using the known rate of axial precession, the gradual wobble of the Earth's axis, he calculated that Tiwanaku's layout would have been accurate around 15,000 BC. This conclusion, if true, would make Tiwanaku the oldest city on Earth, predating Mesopotamia, Egypt, and every known civilization by over 10 millennia. To Posnansky, this meant that Tiwanaku had been built by a people who existed long before the rise of recorded history, a culture advanced enough to understand astronomy, architecture, and engineering on a level that rivaled the modern age. He believed that these people had flourished before a great global cataclysm, possibly the end of the last ice age, wiping out most traces of their existence and leaving Tiwanaku as one of the few surviving testaments to their knowledge. Posnansky's dating was radical and his interpretation even more so. He envisioned Tiwanaku not merely as a city, but as the capital of an advanced civilization that once stretched across much of South America. He proposed that Lake Titicaca had once extended far beyond its current boundaries, covering much of the surrounding Altiplano. He also noted what appeared to be signs of glacial weathering on the stones, erosion patterns that, he argued, could only have occurred if the site had been exposed to massive floods or melting ice at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. In Posnansky's view, Tiwanaku was not a ceremonial center from 1,500 years ago, but the epicenter of a civilization that existed before the Great Flood, described in myths from cultures around the world. He connected these stories, whether from Sumer, Egypt, or the Bible, to a global memory of the same event that ended the age of the great builders. Long before recorded history, there were advanced ancient civilizations capable of building gigantic megalithic structures we can't build today, lifting enormous stone blocks weighing thousands of tons and stacking them with laser-like precision. Blocks we still struggle to lift even with our modern cranes. They crafted mathematically precise, flawless monuments from the hardest stone on Earth, leaving us to wonder who these builders were and how they accomplished the impossible. Were they merely primitive societies, or were they masters of a forgotten technology lost to the sands of time? Uncover the evidence of an ancient, global, and technologically sophisticated civilization that once ruled over our planet, constructing gigantic sites the ruins of which are still standing, before a cataclysmic event erased it from memory. Access our eBook, Prehistoric Megastructures, a nearly 500-page volume packed with images and in-depth analysis of some of the most astonishing and unexplained ancient structures ever discovered, monuments that were clearly built with advanced technology from a time long forgotten. There's a limited discount on the ebook, so make sure to get yours before it's too late.